Morning, everyone.
Foundation for inviting us here. And second, I want to say that I was truly moved and happy at the same time because this conference is somehow dedicated to the memory of my very good friend Vangelis Kypriotis. So now we can go on with the presentation of the panelists. Ayça Akarçay. She holds a bachelor degree in economics from Middle East Technical University and a master's degree from Boğaziçi University and a PhD from École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales in Paris. And she is currently working at the economics department of Galatasaray University. And her research interests include development economics and economic history. So I will turn the floor to...
Yeah. Herkese merhaba.
Hello, everyone. This is a common joint study by Nurhan Davutyan and Sezgin Polat. We, three of us, are very grateful to the foundation. The title is the agricultural productivity in the transition from empire to republic in the Aegean region. Actually, there is a long background to that study. I would like to start with that. From the empire to the republic, this transition, there is a loss of population and there is a transformation in the structure of the population, the influences of that transformation and their short-term consequences has not been researched in a detailed manner. That's what we believe. When we look at the literature, the war and its economical influences from the point of view of the economy history, it has been examined in the 10 years. We actually examined the violence and physical disturbance was examined, and the influences on the population and other structural differences could also be examined. We see those all around the world. In the literature, in order to gain speed, for that to gain speed is with an article by Acemoğlu and friends. In that article, what they try to do is to examine the long-term influences of the war on development and the transformation influence of war on the structure of the population, especially focusing on the minorities and the capital owned by the minorities and making it more calculatable. Especially in 1930, the loss of population in Jewish population, the size of the city, wage, similar very popular changes are taken into account, and they also examine the transfer of the influence, and they show that there is a permanent change in the job structures, occupational structures. So many studies actually were completed within the context of the world economy history. In relation to Turkey, there are two new studies, one from Sakallı, the other is Arbatlı and Gökmen. And these are similar to Acemoğlu and friends' work. They look at the population structure before the war, and they compare those with the current influences. What is done here is, of course, looking at the population resources as the main resource and look at the current changes. Our contribution we looked at the agricultural performance. I will explain it later. And while we are doing this, we compare the performance before the event and after the event. We not only look at the population, and along with the population, we look at the economic outputs, agricultural outputs, and we compare it with the post-war area. And we believe that this is important because when you look at only from the long-term perspective, you sometimes cannot calculate the influence of other factors in the long term, because when we come till 2000s, we see some other influences. So we prefer looking at it in the short run. The problematic here is the development of the agricultural performance in Aegean, and along with that, the transformation in the structure of the population and its influences, basically the Anatolian Greeks and of course other communities. In these kind of studies and in our study, the assumption is that is there an ethnicity specific human capital? Is there this notion existing or not? What we're talking about, that is could be the production knowledge, know-how on the use of the land, and know-how on the agricultural production, and also commercial networks. Some communities may have stronger commercial networks. Of course, we cannot test this directly because we do not have the desired amount and intensity of information that we need, so we cannot prove it, but we have this assumption in our mind. Why we are talking about agricultural production? First of all, is a very practical reason. And we have a data limitation, of course. We need a great number of data, so we wanted to work on the district level, and on district level as an economic or non-economic output, you cannot find much. The most comprehensive data from the Ottoman time we have in relation to agriculture, both relating to the methodology and covering the geography, and of course the importance of the agricultural activities. We generally discuss these economy-related issues on the basis of urban areas, but at the beginning of the Ottoman Empire and at that period we have a great majority of agricultural production, and we know that non-Muslims are also very active in the agricultural area, which has not been studied a lot. So on the basis of districts we have this study. We have some elements here. We look at the population, we look at the climate and other changeables. What we look at as the data, we have 1907-1909 agricultural statistics, and we have again agricultural statistics dating 1913-1940, and we have Turkstat's data, but they were actually presented on the basis of provinces, so we went into the details to see the district basis data. The problem about that is, in time, when you go along in time, the quality of the data drops and the geographical expansion shrinks. So we have, in short, 1907-1909. I will call it 09 because that's what we have collected, and 1913 and 1914 statistics. In 1913, this agricultural statistics, this is not an actual counting, but the statistics, we saw some weirdness in the figures. We used them, but actually we will be sharing with you the study we carried out on the basis of the figures of 09.
Hepinizin aşina olduğu
When we look at the census, we have the population statistics from 1914 brought to us by Karpat, and we looked back the originals. And in the Republic area, we have the census of 1927. So pro and post events, we have the agriculture and population data. We added the geographical characteristics. For instance, the total wheat production capacity brought by FAO. We use that. There is this draft index of climate, which includes our region as of 1901, and of course we transfer those to the district level, because these are only geographical information. And the biggest problem we had was the harmonization of the districts, actually, because in time there has been many changes in the structures of the districts. Here we benefited from Cézanne's work. It's a really important resource. If it did not if it was not available to us, we were not be able to carry on, probably. And some districts, for instance, they were accepted as smaller villages, and they were accepted as districts after a while, and some districts were turned into smaller administration units. So we try to harmonize them all. Agricultural data, when we are arranging the agricultural data, we try to eliminate those weird areas. If we came across with some very weird data, we excluded them. We also had some issues in relation to the volume and weight. We do not have poultry included in those data. We don't have the grape products. These were not included in the statistics in the data at that period of the Ottoman time. I will just skip those. These are the products we have when we compare the 0709. We have the ticks you see, and there is those ticks when we compare 13 and 29. We have 18 products as a result. In relation to the population, there is also a classification, and there is the transformation of those classification. At first there is this classification of ethnicity, and then this classification is done on the basis of religion. So as you see, we have Christians, Protestants, Armenians. So in short, let me say that the Greek community, which was named Greek in the Ottoman time, now called as Orthodox in the Republican time. We will look at the population and the agricultural outputs. And agricultural outputs, we have three issues: agricultural performance, the harvest on the basis of a unit of land, and then we have per capita agricultural production, again on the level of districts, and we have this agricultural diversity index. So we wanted to see the diversity in agricultural production. We believe that this diversification is important because it brings rotation, increases productivity, it protects against the uncertainty, it gives us some clues about the market. So if there is a diversity in agricultural production, we can assume that the know-how is higher. In relation to the population elements, we look at the share of the Greeks. For instance, we have this differences in this. This is from an article by Aleki, and and this has become usable after they wrote that Alesina article. It is being widely used all over the world. What is this differentiation? This is fractionality in index. This is I think this fractionality is a neutral term. It's important to use a neutral term because theoretically it is uncertain because we don't know whether it has a positive or negative influence on the development. Actually, this was discussed in the morning, whether there is a rivalry among communities, which means, for instance, these human capitals. Can we replace those? And if we can replace those, if we can substitute them, this might cause more conflict, more dispute. If it is substitutable, then the literature suggests that this has a positive influence. So this is why we, for the first time, tried to create this fractionality index, and we also wanted to create this polarization index. When there are, of course, it is important to have two very major communities and smaller communities. The literature on this is various. This Alesina has this ethnical and religious index. If you have information on the local level in relation to the neighborhood, you can look at the proximity, how close they live to each other, and the marriages, and there are some multidimensional fractions, but we did not have the space available for that. If you're working in a smaller scale, if you have the opportunity to collect more data, you can also have interesting results.
First of all, I would like to show you some slides about Turkey, and now you see productivity. So crops per agricultural land, and you see 909 and 27 at the bottom. So if the Turkish average is 1, if it is darker, it means that it's more productive. However, if the color is lighter, it means that it is less productive. So we see in 09, we see a larger diversity in terms of development, regional development, and in 27 we see that there's a shift towards the west. The productivity shifts to the west, and let's talk about the Aegean region now. And here you see the colors are darker here. If you notice, the colors are darker on the map. And here, per capita production, so it is relative, and we see the deviations in the districts from the average, and we see a similarity here. There's a diversification, but in time this diversification reduces, and there's a shift towards this direction. And this is the diversification index, and in agricultural diversification we see a similar table. So this also gives us a similar information. And this map gives us the ethnical religious fragmentation index, and I think it's not quite surprising. And you see that in 09 it is more fragmented, but then it is less fragmented. And now let's look at the Greek population. Since we are interested in the Aegean, let's talk about the Greek population now. And in the inner Anatolia, in Black Sea, and in Thrace, you see them, and they are mostly in Istanbul in 27. And what about the Aegean region? And let's look at the population. It's quite interesting here. On the left-hand side, you see 14, and on the right-hand side, you see 27. And this is absolute figure, and we see that there is no substantial decrease in the population. Probably internal migration was quite serious in those days. Yes, on one hand we see some developments at the city center in Izmir, but when compared to the Turkey, you see that it's not in a very bad position. This gives us the relative picture. You see how much population of Turkish population does the Aegean takes. You see that there is no large difference between 14 and 27. In other regions, this difference is larger. So we can say that Aegean is the region which is less impacted from this transition in terms of agriculture. And you see the population of Greek Orthodox on a district basis. I didn't give you the 27 figures in order not to upset you, but when we look at the agriculture, when we compare 09 and 27, here we see that within the Aegean region, there's a fragmentation and there's diversification. However, this decreases in time, and you see that there's a shift towards north, and this is the picture. There's a shift to the north, and this is absolute level. So, what about the performance of these districts when compared to Turkey? This transformation becomes more visible when we come to 27. You see this shift towards north more visible, and I will give you the per capita figures now. These are absolute figures, and so you see the district performance compared to Turkish performance, and you see how development takes place, and this is a diversity index. And you see the relative crop diversity compared to Turkey, and you see there is a shift towards north. And therefore, our story is the following. So there are three things. First of all, the Aegean region. The performance of the Aegean region, when compared to the performance of the rest of the country, it was not badly influenced during the transition from empire to nation state. But we see that within the region there was a shift towards north, and probably there was internal migration in this period. And Ayhan Hoca mentioned opposition in the morning. And so when do we have opposition? Does it happen when you are in a worse position, or does it occur when you improve and you try to take a larger share in the pie? So does opposition occur then? So I think we should discuss when this opposition occurs. So my time is up. I'm not going to show you all the tables. We also carried out some economic studies taking geographical characteristics into account in our assumptions, and our study has not been completed yet, but our findings show us the following. We see the reduction in the Greek population, and it has a negative influence on per capita income. We do not see its impact on other agricultural variables. And when we look at the fragmentation index, some assumptions tell us that it didn't have an impact, or it shows that it might have a negative impact. This reduction in the population might have a negative impact. So during the Ottoman period in the Aegean region, ethnical fragmentation did not create a negative impact on development. So these figures give us this information. Thank you.